Hello everyone, this is Mr. Fraser here with a quick little module on reading for social studies. Before we begin, I want to make sure that you remember that these are unscripted, and as such you're going to hear me make mistakes, sound silly, and all that good stuff. When we read for social studies, when we're talking about reading for social studies, we're talking about one of the most important lifelong skills that I could teach you this year. Reading for social studies basically occurs whenever you use nonfiction for a purpose in this world, and you try to learn about other people, other cultures, news stories, historical sources, all of that involve these skills I'm about to teach you. It is something that is worthwhile. We want to make sure that you rewind if you have questions or confusions, or ask questions. So here we go. First rule for social studies is you got to be greedy, and what that means is, first thing, you choose sources with purpose. And what do we mean by choose sources with purpose? Well, what we mean is that you do not read selections or sources that don't apply to what you're trying to learn about. So we select very carefully what we read, whether it's selecting the right book or the right even section of an article. We don't waste our time. So it's a very efficient form of reading. We read only what we need to. Second rule is we keep track, and that means we write on paper. That means we read multiple times. So when we read a source, we first read it to identify simply the facts or figures or ideas that we might be able to use later. Then we go back and we read it and try to establish for each section the main idea and supporting details. And then we go back and we try and establish what is the main idea of the whole section. Lastly, we apply our reading, and what that means is we are actually going to write about what we read. And we won't talk about that in as much detail today, but that very much is, if our goal is to be able to write or speak about what we're reading and apply that knowledge, then the way in which we read has to be done very specifically, which we'll teach you now. When you are given a reading, you need to look at the source and ask yourself who wrote it, what did they write it for, and what type of source it is. If it's a news article or a textbook reading or an encyclopedia article or even a website, the way in which you read it is very much going to depend upon the goals of the author. So for example, if it's a news source, you need to look at it very factual. They're trying to share facts and information. If it's a textbook, they're trying to teach you some curricular goal. If it's a website, they may be trying to convince you of something, sell you something. And so you need to be very critical of where does this information come from. So when you get any reading for social studies, you start with who wrote it, who did they write it for, and what type of source is it. Next, when you get a source, you need to break it down. Breakdown is what we would call a reading or a close reading. And so you're going to pay attention to two very important aspects, the main idea and the supporting detail. When you break it down, okay, and find the main idea and supporting detail, what you're doing is you're establishing notes, because rule number 2 is to keep track, okay? You're establishing notes that you can then go back and figure out what the main idea and details were for the entire piece. So let's show you what the main idea, when we break down the main idea, what it should look like. A main idea is what the section or whole reading is all about. It is never a single word, and it must be a sentence in your own words. Okay? Now, a main idea will always begin with this phrase: the author is trying to say that. And then it will continue. Now, the reason why we start a main idea always with the author is trying to say that is because it allows for us to complete this sentence by avoiding plagiarism. So they're trying to say, not they actually said. And so it's an exercise in paraphrasing. And when you are able to paraphrase smaller sections and then the entire piece, it allows for us to then go apply our reading through writing without worrying about copying. When we look for supporting details, we're looking for details that support the main idea. These are usually statistics, quotes, and facts. The important thing to remember here is that supporting details aren't necessarily always a quote, but if you're going to quote, remember that you need to keep track of the pages that you get it from, and often the section number is needed. And that's so you can go back and when you write about it, or even when you review your reading notes, you can find very quickly what you were talking about. So you want to keep track. That's, again, rule number 2. So with this breakdown, what you're going to get is a relationship between main ideas and supporting details. For every main idea, there should be a handful of supporting details. When the main ideas for smaller sections are combined, what you end up having is a structure like this. So you have a main idea for the entire section, smaller main ideas for each smaller section, and then supporting details underneath each of those. Let me give you a little key. Supporting. S equals supporting detail. The goal here is that you can take this and you can turn it into writing for social studies, which is ORQs, essays, summaries, which is the most common. In essence, you can take your reading notes and turn it very easily into writing. You can apply your read knowledge incredibly easy if you follow this pattern we're teaching you now of finding main ideas and supporting details. So what we're going to ask you to do next is to actually take a reading and attempt it. Remember to start with the supporting details. Start with the reading and taking just note of possible important information, then go back and find the main ideas and supporting details for each section. And then lastly, find the main idea for the entire reading. Give it a shot and then check out the video I made where we actually show you how it's done. If you have any questions, remember you can ask me in person or try online. Best of luck, guys.